Okay, yeah, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about device orchestration, which is a slightly different way of approaching how we might produce a spatial audio experience, possibly a slightly more pragmatic way of saying, well, we have this motivation that we know that there's a relatively low uptake of some of the high-end technology out there, such as, for example, a 5.1 surround or above. But one thing that we do know is that in addition to perhaps having, say, your smart TV at the front of the room, which you're listening to a stereo experience over, there are often many other devices littered around the average living room that can produce sound. So we have mobile phones, laptops, Bluetooth speakers, etc. And so one of the questions that we've been asking on S3A over the last few years is, what could we do if we could address these devices? And specifically, what could we do if learning what we have about things like object type categories and with the tools that we've developed, what kind of sounds could we send to those devices to best augment a media experience? And this is what we've been terming media device orchestration, or MDO, so using ad hoc arrays to augment typically a stereo media experience, but it could be extended to beyond that. And the main topics that we've been addressing within this really have been based around three areas, each kind of informing the other. So the development of tools for the creation of content, and then evaluating listener experience, with that feeding back in again. So hopefully next time around we can make better tools for a better production, for a better listener experience, and so on. A couple of examples of evaluation that I'd like to bring up are based on some of the early work that we did using some existing object-based audio content and some rendering rules that we had at the time. The first one of which is a Qualitative Study, which featured in a AES journal paper. And that used feedback from a demonstration system, which some of the feedback is shown in some of the word clouds there, positive and negative attributes or comments relating to the demonstration in the word clouds. That was used to perform a thematic analysis to pull out attributes about the scene that were important. Both positive, in this case immersion was a particularly positive aspect of the MDO experience that came out, and in terms of negative as well, things that possibly we might want to avoid in a system. So effect on music in this example was one that was particularly came out as being something that we might want to avoid. Then subsequently we performed a quantitative study which featured in an AES conference paper and hopefully to be extended to journal paper shortly. And this was an experiment, slightly more controlled experiment, where we looked at quality of listening experience, multi-stimulus method, and compared it to more conventional methods, including a high reference of a five-channel surround system with high-quality loudspeakers. And the overall outcome was effectively that the media device orchestration system that we set up was able to match the 5-channel surround system in terms of quality of experience when in the sweet spot, but when outside of the sweet spot it was actually able to exceed the performance of the 5-channel system, so being slightly more robust to the listener position. And that's kind of illustrated in the bottom left plot, which shows the difference in listening experience in those two different positions across systems. Another important element was the tools. So we, bearing in mind the next slide talks about a production, we wanted the tools to do a few key things. Firstly, we wanted to implement some of the things that we learned from listening tests, but also we wanted it to be in a familiar work environment, so VSTs and a DAW, and also we needed it, importantly, to be kind of flexible and rapidly editable, because we didn't really know before putting people in an experience like this what they would want to do with the system. And an important one to mention is the top one, which is Metadata Editor VST, which we could specify this advanced metadata, which feeds into our metadata processing, where we can implement our rendering rules. And that was discussed in a few of the earlier presentations. And then finally, in terms of production, more recently, we commissioned a script which considered what could be done with MDO right from start to finish, so some script writing in the top corner with Ed Selleck there, considering what MDO could do in terms of storytelling, right through to production in a kind of living room style environment. And finally, this ended up as a BBC Taster experience, which was a browser-based implementation where people could connect their additional devices, so there's someone choosing to add their phone here and reporting roughly where they want to put it in the space, and that would adapt to their configuration. And that's pretty much it, other than to say that this is now being evaluated in terms of the listener experience that came out of the back of the Vostok-K incident, and hopefully will inform future iterations of media device orchestration.